kind of stories. Who here has heard of BitTorrent? Yay! So Bram Cohen was the original developer of BitTorrent. He does a thing called Chia these days, and again, like they realized, but they were both cypherpunks, right? And they both worked in the year 2000 on a project called Mojo Nation. Their company was called Evil Geniuses for a Better Tomorrow. And Mojo Nation was a decentralized storage system that let you trade computing resources with a currency attached to it in the year 2000, right? And it didn't work. It failed. Like I think Bram Cohen describes it as a glorious failure. But one of the things is that failure led to people learning how not to do this, right? It was definitely an influence on early thinking that led to Bitcoin. Len Sassaman, who is one of the #1 suspects for being Satoshi. I don't think he's Satoshi. I spoke at his memorial, but I don't know who Satoshi is either. Just in case you're going to torture me for his private key. But they worked on this project, and Len was a flatmate and apartment mate of, I think, Bram Cohen at that time. So they all went off and learned their lessons. Bram Cohen learned lessons about don't aim to do everything, like fit into the existing system, and he took the distribution system of Mojo Nation, and that became BitTorrent. Zuko took the data storage part of it and built a thing called Tahoe Labs, Tahoe LAFS. And Tahoe Labs attempted to solve some of these problems about how you might do a decentralized storage system. One of the things that Filecoin draws from this rich history of learning from other people's explorations, mistakes, victories, is the idea of content addressing. So who here knows what content addressing is? Excellent. I'm looking at you because you've got a really good face for this. You go, yes, I know that. Oh no, I know. So like this is basically a 101 tutorial. Okay, so content addressing, so one of the big challenges that a decentralized storage system like Mojo Nation suffers from, which is like, here's the data that I want. Usually on the internet, we get the data that we want by sending a postcard, right? Addressed to, literally an address, to a particular location, right? And it's not a geographical location, but it's a corporate location, right? If we want to get some pictures from NASA, we go, here, dear NASA.gov, I would like the picture from /nude/Mars/ right? And that's where you go and get it. So everything is addressed like that. If you have a decentralized storage system, it's very important that it doesn't depend. Where the data is shouldn't matter, right? If it's stored in multiple places, as it is in BitTorrent, right? You can't go, oh, dear this person, this person, this person, I want the data, right? You need to have a way of permanently referring to data that doesn't like pin it down into one place. Because one of the things you want to do is have multiple copies. The other thing you want to do is be resilient, right? If suddenly NASA blows up or the Internet Archive disappears into an earthquake rift zone, right? You still want to be able to say, I want this data. So the first layer that everybody learned with decentralized storage was content addressing, right? And if you've ever heard of IPFS and used in sort of NFTs and things, that's that layer, right? And it can be used by anyone, right? It's designed to be generic because the other important thing, and this is why I'm drawing on the Internet Archive story, is lots of copies keep stuff safe, right? The idea with resilience is you just keep lots of copies of the data. So if somebody sets on fire, or somebody's taken out by COVID, or someone has plague, or the barbarians come and burn down your library, right? If you have one copy, that's enough. And that's why decentralized storage is incredibly important in a system. Not just because of our sort of ideological idea that we don't want somebody in control or censoring or extracting value from our networks, right? It's actually better for the long-term preservation of humanity's most important information, right? Okay, so that's the first layer. The second layer is about how do you incentivize people to do this. And for those of you who understand a little bit about Filecoin is the incentive layer on top of this. At the Internet Archive, pretty much works on the kindness of its donors. It's a non-profit, we support it, and the public good of Bristol that's created, right? Which is fine, and that gets you one copy, right? But in a system where you're distributing files everywhere, you're taking up people's resources, and they're kind of like, well, what's in it for me, right? Like, I need to have some incentive for storing up people's data. Sometimes you do a quid pro quo system, and that's what BitTorrent does, right? I'm storing this, and I will share it with you if you share what I have, right? But if you want to build an entire system out of that's well, the genius of crypto, right, is that you replace that sort of like good feeling on quid pro quo with an actual sort of financial incentive, and that's what Filecoin does. Filecoin sets up an incentive system that encourages corporations to do that backing up process, even though you have a lot, as a user, right, you have a lot of switching, right? In many ways, Filecoin is just, you can build a lot of decentralized storage systems on IPFS. It doesn't have to be Filecoin, right? You could like store something on Dropbox, right? You could store something on Amazon. You could store something on Wix, right? You could do whatever you want, right? But if you content address it, then you'll always be able to find it. The hard thing, the challenging thing, is creating a system that encourages enough places for you to store that means that you can keep those copies going, right? We're in a really tragic and dangerous moment at the moment because a huge amount of our data is piled up in single corporate structures. And that poses, I mean, I don't want to overstate the risk that suddenly all of Amazon is struck by an angry god that thinks he's Jeff Bezos, right? I mean, it could happen, right? But they actually use this decentralized distributed systems in their data centers, right? However, the idea that control falls to an individual corporate entity with its own interests separate from you, right, is a much bigger problem. As many people who've tried to compete with Amazon in the past have learned, right? You go, okay, we're gonna start off by selling something like Amazon did. Amazon started by selling off books, right? We'll start with something like eggs, and then we can grow in the same way as Amazon grows. You end up selling your eggs on Amazon. Amazon goes, oh, I noticed that brown eggs are selling much better because they're collecting all of that data, and they open Amazon basic brown eggs, right, and destroys your market. So that's the kind of systemic challenge here that decentralized storage is all about. And honestly, it's one of the things that attracts people into the Filecoin network. They want resilience, they want redundancy, but they also want independence from their potential competitors in this space. Everybody knows that Apple, Microsoft, Google, and everyone is incredibly intent in managing to survive the AI switch turnover, right? And so they're going to go rummaging through all of that data that you very generously gave them at some point in the past, right, to get an advantage over you and your independent AI project. So it's incredibly important to get this data stored in multiple places, right? And allow you to move it if there's any change in sort of jurisdictional or market incentives in the companies you're working with, right? So you don't depend on them. So that's kind of the market side of things. Back to Bran Cohen, Zuko, and the year 2000, right? This was called the peer-to-peer revolution at the time. And it's funny because it didn't quite work, partly because it got sued into non-existence by the music industry, partly because they were trying to solve too much. Bitcoin was one of those things that needed to come along before that this could work out, and partly just because Web 2 kind of was able to hack around a bunch of the problems that they were desperately trying to solve at that time. You go, oh, don't worry about that. We'll deal with it. Google will deal with it. We'll work with it, right? And I want to just end by highlighting some of those ways that led to the centralization of the internet, led to the peer-to-peer revolution kind of fading away, and Web 2 kind of stepping into its place. And this was a literal thing that happened. The term Web 2.0 comes from a series of conferences called the Web 2.0 conferences, led by Tim O'Reilly, who, if you've ever seen those old computer books, those are the O'Reilly books. The person who published that coined the term Web 2.0. But those conferences were the same conferences as the peer-to-peer emerging tech conferences. They just renamed it when they realized that this particular revolution was running out of steam. So, what were the challenges? What is Filecoin doing to deal with those challenges? What are those challenges that you can take into account when designing your thing that will not only let you protect yourself against a centralized competitor from taking over what you have, but also you'll have some understanding and some historical insight into why we're trying to build this sort of thing into the Filecoin. So, one of the first ones is security, and I don't just mean computer security, I mean security and trust that you're getting what you want. The centralized systems sell themselves on being able to be very trustworthy and secure. But it's a feudal kind of security. It's like everybody in the world is very scary, come into our castle and we'll protect you, right? And that's fine as long as you trust those organizations, right? Out here in the Wild West, right, you all know that trust is a very difficult thing, right? You either have to trust yourself and like bury your ledger in 6 foot of earth, right? Or, tattoo your seat key into your eyelid, the inside of your eyelids, right? And also records, right? Also people get hacked and stuff like that. So this is a problem we're trying to solve. I work on the Filecoin Foundation and we do a lot of investment in just securing the network. We draw, again, on these experiences. For instance, Zuko, his full name when I knew him was Zuko Wheelerkrantz. I think he's changed it now, but anyway. He studied a thing called Least Authority. Least Authority is one of the major firms that does security audits for everyone in this sector, and that's because we all learn, like, we've got to protect the software. On the other side, though, is trusting that data is actually stored. And if you know anything about Filecoin, you'll know that we have a proof of storage system. It's one of the very first deployments of zero-knowledge proofs that absolutely guarantees that data is stored. And now I feel like a salesman because I'm wearing suspenders and I'm going, absolutely guaranteed. But it mixes, it stores, it distributes. But trust the math, right? It's a mathematic way of proving that data is not only stored and replicated. So that's the trust system that you know that we're all trying to build in the decentralized stuff. And that's as solid as math compared to the kind of trust me, I'm Elon Musk kind of thing. I trusted Elon Musk, and now I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I want a system that does not take as many drugs. And I don't know, right? But like you build a system that's resilient to me, say, going crazy, right? Like, okay, and trust me, if you think I'm going crazy, I have no influence on the map. Right? So anyway, so there's trust. The other one that's tricky is privacy. Open networks, it's very hard to do things in private. And honestly, I know this sounds crazy, but the reason why so many people moved to Facebook, and I remember this when people moved from Friendster, right, is because it meant that they could have private conversations at last on the internet, right? They could talk to their friends, they could share information in the same role as like group chats play now. That's what Facebook was in the beginning. And the internet, and frankly open systems, are not great at that. Why aren't they great at that? Because you can cheat in a centralized system and say, we'll keep hold of your contact lists, right? We'll keep hold of that list. And the deal is that they'll keep a whole list of your friends so you can communicate with them. The catch is that now Mark Zuckerberg is your friend, right? Like he's part of that process. We can build systems that are better at that. One of the things that came out of those early cypherpunks, it was encoded into Mojo Nation and Tahoe Labs, and it's now being encoded into great projects like Fission's project, Banyan Computer. I recommend that you check out and talk to Claudia about Banyan, which is building this system into as an extra layer on top of Filecoin, right? Because what it's using is a thing, and if you forget everything else I've told you, this is the thing to remember, capability-based security, right? Remember Ross Anderson? We talked about him at the beginning. He went to work at the University of Cambridge and took what the cypherpunks were learning and tried to design a secure system that would work at every level of the stack, right? That's now been developed by Microsoft, and I think there'll be a lot of buzz about this, right? And it'll be very low level buzz, like, there are just a few people who know about these things, and now there are like 5 more, right? There's a system called Cherie, This is a hardware, CHERI. This is a hardware stack that Microsoft has been developing for some time, right? And basically, it's a way of building more secure software. On top of that, you can build more secure operating systems. Google, you may remember Google doing a thing called Fuchsia, Fuchsia. I don't know why all these things are hard to pronounce, and when you do mispronounce them, they sound incredibly rude, but it's true, right? So Fuchsia was a capability-based operating system. Google's kind of abandoning that now because they've taken the same drugs as Elon Musk and going, hey, I don't know, just throw it out, right? But as Google falls, right, that's your opportunity. So Fuchsia is open source. So everybody's like, okay, gang, we'll stick that on top of this hardware. So this is going on at the hardware level, right? At the software level, what we have is things like Banyan, things like a thing called UCAN, right? Which is a capability-based authentication system, which we use another service of Web3 storage that uses this. And again, it's built onto Filecoin. Filecoin uses capability-based security and a lot of stuff that it builds as well, right? And the idea is we can build a secure stack. And back then, right, one of the reasons, a lot of people failed, a lot of people tried to do things, and a lot of people failed in the early 2000s. And it was because it was incredibly ambitious, right? It was an incredible project to try and pursue. And like a few people couldn't do it on their own, right? But time has moved on, right? Like we're a few people here, but look at all the people who are thinking the same way. Like we can build these things. And at the time, everybody I talked to who was a security expert says, yes, we need a capability-based, decentralized, distributed, resilient storage system for the future so we can preserve the whole of history. But oh my God, the crap that we deal with at the moment, like people are storing files in directories on Windows, right? Like if we're going to get there, if we're going to get into that future, we wouldn't start from here. We'd have to boil the ocean. We'd have to start from scratch, right? And this is our opportunity to start from scratch. But you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from 30 years of lessons already learned. And Filecoin, IPFS, all of these systems, and the systems that are being built right now on top of them, have learned from all of those lessons. I'll just end with the fact that a lot of the people that I've described are no longer with us. Len Sassaman passed away. One of the inspirations for what the Internet Archive does, their open library, currently being attacked by the publishers, was directly inspired by Aaron Swartz. And Aaron Swartz worked on the first iterations of that, right? And Aaron is no longer with us. Dan Kaminsky, Len Sassaman's face is encoded into the Bitcoin stack, right? He's got a little ASCII face. It's one of the reasons why people think he's Satoshi. The person who built that in was an amazing security expert. He's one of the people that was a huge influence on how we're doing things. Dan saved the internet when he found a flaw in DNS that meant it was broken and everybody had to coordinate secretly to fix it. Dan also passed away, right? And many of these folks were suicides, right? Because they were lonely and they were trying to achieve the impossible. So I just have this is kind of a depressing thing to end on, right? But I just have like this mental health thing for you all, right? Like you're going to go away from ETHDENVER and you're going to have that kind of like, oh, now I'm just sitting in my room typing, right? And I just encourage you to stay in touch, right? Stay in touch even with your competition, right? Even with the people that in another world and another history you'd be competing from, because it's only through sharing our knowledge of our victories and our mistakes, right? I really feel like all of those people got that depressed because they thought, I'm not up to this, right? They were all fucking geniuses, right? But they went, look, I'm making all of these mistakes, and the mistakes don't matter in the way that you think they matter, right? When you fuck up, like, that's an important lesson to learn, and everybody fucked up, right? I was in the room with these people, and they were fuck-ups, right? Like that's, maybe go back to the capability-based security thing to remember, right? But like, continue to talk at us at Filecoin. We're deliberately set up to be an open community. I'm Danny@phil.org. I'm happy to join you. I really want more followers on Farcaster, and I know I will pay you. No, I won't pay that. No, I think that's okay in podcasts. I will pay you more to whatever. But anyway, keep in touch. find out stuff about what Filecoin is doing, and if you ever feel like, oh God, I'm such a dweeb, like this is never going to work out, email me, and I will tell you even more secret stories of the early history. So, thank you very much for listening.
It was awesome.
Claudia is over there. She's